guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Mail. So for today, I'm going to go over an email that was sent from a subscriber. That's from a guy, he is in his 70s, and he shares his story from like 50 years ago, 50, when he was first married to his wife and only wife for a couple of years, and he noticed that she started hanging out with a neighbor, who he definitely knew was trouble. He could tell and knew she was a cheater, and it was going to rub off on his wife and cause drama for him. And like a lot of smart husbands, told her about this, but of course, she didn't want to hear it. Right? Well, guess what? It isn't before long before, guess what? It's proven right because she's putting the moves on him. And let's just say that his wife has a totally different opinion of her after that, and that certainly doesn't like being wrong. And I thought it'd be an entertaining one to go over here, guys, to show you, number one, whether it's now, 50 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, human nature is what it is, and they don't change, but also backing up why I tell you, you got to pay attention who your girlfriend or wife hangs out with because they're going to rub off on them. Absolutely. And you got every right to speak up about it if you see trouble. The thing is, they usually don't like you telling them that their friend is trouble because, hey, they haven't figured it out, so they don't want you to tell them. As well, of course, is that a lot of women, the old joke about don't try to understand women. Women understand women. They hate each other. Well, how many times they try to sabotage their so-called friends' relationships by hitting on their boyfriends or husbands and all that. Never ceases to amaze me. And it's no different 50 years ago. And this guy now is able to have the last laugh talking about this because he was right all along. So remember, guys, you have a right to say that for your relationship guys when you see trouble with her friends. So it starts off, says here, Dear SSM, I've been a subscriber to this channel for a few months now, and I find the accounts both interesting and amusing. The account that I will be describing happened about 50 years ago when my wife and I have been married for 2 years or so. We were living in a small duplex type of apartment in a medium-sized city with our daughter who was about 1 year old at the time. My wife, who I will call Mary 1, well, is your name Obi-Wan? Myself, Samuel, and the cheating wife, Mary number 2, and her husband, Wimpy. Obviously, we're speaking in code here. When we first moved into the apartment, we had no clue the situation between Mary 2 and Wimpy. Wimpy had a best friend who we should call Tyrone, and this so-called best friend used to spend a lot of time with Mary 2, especially when Wimpy was at work. It didn't take a mathematical genius or a police detective to figure out that those two were doing what they were doing when Wimpy was at work. However, the only reason that I followed this relationship closely was due to my wife, Mary 1, associating with Mary 2. Okay, so it didn't take long for you to figure out, it's probably the talk of the neighborhood, that Mary number 2 is a big giant cheater. And I'm sure Tyrone isn't the only one she's hooking up with. So you don't want your wife hanging out with her. But your wife is lonely, she's bored, she wants her friend. Probably they gossip about the excitement and all that. Because the cheater is going to get other gals to cheat. After several failed attempts to convince my wife to end her association with Mary 2, I talked to her when we were alone in our apartment one day. I explained to her my concerns with regard to her relationship with Mary number 2, the cheater. I mentioned the comment made by our landlord concerning Mary 1's association with that woman and how it reflects poorly on my wife. Yeah, let me guess. This is 1970s. Feminism is really coming about. You can't control me. You can't tell me who I can hang out with. Nah, 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 nah. I then stated that people often judge you by the company you keep with, but this didn't seem to have any effect on her, because she didn't give a shit. At this point, I informed the said wife that if she follows in her so-called friend's footsteps, when I find out, it'll be both the first and last time that she cheats on our family. Good for you. Good for you for saying that. Making it abundantly clear that won't be tolerated. I won't be that jackass that forgives you and keeps on staying because of the kid. Before she could come up with the usual, you wouldn't do that line, I reminded her of the time that we stopped dating back in 1971. It says at the time we were going steady. Oh, God. Going steady, huh? This was in the 60s and 70s, and I asked for my high school ring back, much to her surprise at the time. It was also 6 months of absolute crap for me, to her, and vice versa. Well, we eventually got back together, but only after I returned from a one-week vacation with my family. She was crying the whole time, so I was told. Oh, well. I mentioned that cheating during our marriage would result in a situation that would make that situation seem like good times. Good for you for saying that. You stand up for yourself. It's abundantly clear. You stray from me. It's over. Period. Anyway, fast forward to a few weeks later, and both Marys were sitting in our apartment kitchen talking about their husbands in a very low voice when they saw me. I couldn't make out what they were saying, we're talking about specifically, but since this was our apartment, I decided to sit in the conversation. Hey, let me guess, either you're completely paying for everything or most things, so you can sit down in the kitchen and whatever. They seemed to be waiting for me to leave, but when I didn't, Mary number 2 started talking. The topic of husbands came up, and Mary 2 made a comment about how, in general, husbands were useless, particularly in bed. Yeah, she did that on purpose, just to mess with you. I looked at my wife, and she nodded her head in agreement. Your wife nodded her head in agreement? Well, your wife's an asshole. And she's hanging out with this chick, who is also an asshole. At that point, my suspicions were confirmed, and this was the opening that I've been waiting for. I turned to my wife and asked a few questions as follows. I said, "Gee, do you remember last night? Who was it that had enough and requested that we stop the intimacy?" I looked at my wife, waiting for a reply, and she looked away and said, "I don't want to talk about it." My reply was simple. I didn't think so. I really didn't think too much at the time, but Mary too raised her eyebrows while staring at me. I excused myself and left the apartment to go for a ride on my motorcycle. So in other words, your wife couldn't handle you. Very good. All of a sudden, Mary number 2 is like, that guy's packing down there. Dude, that's not cool what your wife was saying and following along with that idiot. It sounds like your wife is a follower. And followers are very susceptible people like Mary number 2. But this is a problem I hope over the years changed. You may think this was the end of it, but a few weeks later, there was an interesting sequel to this story. I was coming home from work and drove my bike around the back of the apartment to park in front of our back door. As I was parking the bike, guess who shoved her head out of the window in the next apartment with her boobs prominently displayed? Yep, you guessed it, Mary too. What, she's like, "Come in for some apple pie," like she can fucking bake. She started talking to me and invited me into their apartment. Don't go there, dude. Nothing but trouble there. I initially declined since I didn't trust her and really had no desire to be alone with her. Very smart. Seeing my reluctance, she switched tactics and said that she had something that she wanted to give to my wife. No, she has something she wants to give to you, big boy. Since they were still associating somewhat, I decided to accept her invitation. Dude, how dumb can you be? After entering the apartment, she made some small talk while I was waiting for her to give me what she had for my wife. Well, I didn't really think she had anything for my wife, but she did start talking about her husband, and he wouldn't be home for some time, and then she mentioned that she had something in the oven. When she bent over to remove a roast from the oven, I noticed that she wasn't wearing any panties. Shocker. At that time, the alarm sounded in my slow brain, rockets went off, and a voice in my head says, "Hey, stupid, you better get out of there." At that point, I stood up and stated, "Oh, I can hear my wife calling, so I better get going," and left through the back door before she could say anything. Very smart, dude. Get the fuck out of there. As I walked into our apartment, my wife was waiting for me and asked in a stern voice, what was I doing next door? Your best friend invited me in. What's the problem? After all, you don't think she's a problem. I paused for a second and then told her Mary too said she had something in her oven for my wife. My wife gave me a questioning look, and I looked her in the eyes and replied, "Hey, don't look at me like that. She's your friend, and how was I supposed to know what she had in her oven for you? Why don't you call her and find out? Because I sure don't know." So, your wife's so-called BFF, once she hears that potentially you're packing a lot down there, all of a sudden putting the moves on you. Don't try to understand women. Women understand women. They hate each other. Shout out to Al Bundy, our mentor and spiritual guide. Yeah, she's putting the moves on you. When women don't have something they want, they sabotage things. My wife dropped the subject and stopped all association with Mary too, even refusing to talk to her after this incident. Well, there you go. She wouldn't believe you when he told her she's trouble, but now she's putting the moves on you. All of a sudden, your wife's like, "Nope, not talking to her." To say that I was happy would be an understatement. A few years later, my wife and I were walking into a mall with our son, who was about a year old at the time, and when a feminine voice shouted, "Hello, Samuel." Yep, our old neighbor, Mary too, walking with her husband, Wimpy. No, she called for you, not your wife. I was about to respond with a greeting when my wife pulled on my arm so hard that I thought she lost her balance or something. However, that was not the case, but I may have had something to do with Mary too, who was approaching us. After a brief conversation with Mary number 2 and Wimpy, I asked my wife what that was all about, and she didn't answer. Of course she didn't answer, because she knows you were right. You were right all along about her, you know? See, guys, even 50 years ago, it's the same principles. There's some valuable lessons that I have carried over with me over the years and maybe summarized as follows. So, our guy here in his 70s is going to be bestowing us some wisdom that a lot of us know, but I'll read it anyway. He says, number one, never overassume too much, especially when it comes to women. Once you do, then one is probably going to make an ass out of themselves. True? Number two, if your gut is telling you that something is wrong, then it probably is, and pay attention to it. Ignoring this warning will result in nothing good, but only bad. This is especially true when it comes to the opposite sex. I've been saying since day one, guys, trust your gut. Something doesn't seem right. She's always on the phone. She's always guarding her phone. Girls' nights all the time. Locked in the bathroom. Suddenly she's working out and trying to make her transform her body, but she hadn't done that for you ever. You put all these things together, something's up. And there's many other examples. Number three, all women and some men seem to thrive on drama, but the level needed can be quite different. If your significant other needs to an exorbitant amount, then it's necessary to either stop it before it becomes overwhelming or part ways. This applies to attention and validation as well. All women love drama. All. And he's right. Also, some men do too. But there's degrees to this shit. Number four, girls' nights out or boys' nights out are just other words for let's go hook up and cheat. There's nothing wrong with guys having female friends when they hang out, but not at bars or other places that are for hookup centers. Exactly. But then again, I've done stories where guys had like book clubs or candle clubs hanging out at the house, and the husbands think that they're doing their book clubs or candle clubs. I did a video on the candle club a few years ago that did well. But meanwhile, that was code for, going out. This applies to husbands as well. If the other partner is not invited, then warning bells should be going off. Marriage is an exclusive relationship that has no room for more than two people. If one partner needs variety, then there's no reason for them to be married. End it. Because for all practical purposes, the marriage is already finished. Exactly. This next weekend, I'm hanging out with my neighbors. He and I become pretty good friends. And he's taking me to the rifle range or the shooting club, whatever he calls and goes to. And he's going to fill up his car with his arsenal, and we're going to go shooting. And it'll be awesome. But, and of course, his wife trusts him. We're not going off picking up chicks or anything like that. He's a happily married guy. So guys can hang out, women can hang out, but it just depends where you're going. And of course, if there's honesty involved. Number five, relationships are built on trust and boundaries, and these two principles rely on each other. Both husband and wife need to demonstrate they are trustworthy by respecting these boundaries. This is nowhere more evident than the relationship with the other persons that are not their partner. Work husbands or wives is trendy and a very dangerous concept for obvious reasons. A person has only one husband or wife, and having one so-called at work is a recipe for disaster. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Number six, couples therapy was not a thing when my wife and I first married. From everything I've read about this, it seems that it is more of a vehicle for the cheaters to justify their actions than actually come to an unbiased understanding. Yeah, I've done countless stories, the couples therapy, and the therapist often sides with the woman, justifying her cheating. These are some of the rules and guidelines I try to live by, and so far have been successful. My wife and I have been married for 50 years, and I'm one of those old farts that people talk about. I don't pretend to be some extraordinary guy or lover, but I was raised by a World War II veteran who served in the Pacific Theater of Operations as a Marine Corps Raider. Well, I too was raised by a World War II Pacific Theater Marine, my father, may he rest in peace. Remember, guys, as I've told you before, my dad, I'm from a second family. He was born in 1922. Yeah, he almost to his dying day, he could tell me the day Pearl Harbor happened, how he and his friends reacted. The next day, they all went to sign up for the Marines, but they didn't take my dad because they wanted him to finish school because they're going to need officers and pilots and all that. Yeah, I was raised by that guy, and let me tell you, he was a hard ass. And at the time, I couldn't stand it, but when I got older, I realized he was doing me a favor. We didn't always see eye to eye, my dad and I, but as the years passed, I learned to appreciate the things my dad told me. Same here, man. The names above are not real names, as I suspected that you can tell from Wimpy. He did seem to grow a very small pair when he caught Tyrone and Mary Sue in a compromising position and told Tyrone to hit the road. I said a very small pair since he remained with Mary Sue until she eventually tired of him and kicked him out. Of course. This is how things usually happen, and those who think it is made up, I will tell them to piss off. I don't care. I just wanted to tell this account to confirm that cheating has been going on for as long as people have been roaming the earth. More prevalent these days, maybe more prevalent these days, but nothing new. My wife doesn't like the fact that I watch all three of your channels, but well, as I tell her, that's the way it is, and I don't tell her not to watch the Hallmark and Lifetime movies, which I don't like. Yeah, what's more damaging? The women watching these ridiculous Hallmark and Lifetime movies and the shit put in their heads, or watching me and channels like mine? At least here you're learning real shit, you're learning reality. Yeah, if she doesn't like my channels, then clearly I'm doing something right. Thanks for reading this post, and you can share if you think it's worth it. I hope this may benefit others who are facing similar situations so they can avoid the lousy results of not noticing the red flags. By the way, my view of cheating is the same now as it was years ago. No fucking way. I would like this to be kept confidential, hence the names are not the real names. Don't worry, sir. Your secret's safe with me. Guys, I will never reveal who you are, your names, your email addresses, where you live, and all that. Just make sure when you're writing the stories, use different names. Don't be specific where you live and where you work and all that, and you're fine. Don't worry about it. Anyway, guys, there you go. No different than 50 years ago. You pay attention to who your girl hangs out with, and goddamn watch out for these friends like that, because they'll put the moves on you if they like you and think that you're just like some other guy that will just sneak around. And they'll be more than happy to screw up their girlfriend's good situations because they're jealous that they got a good man. So there you go. Be careful. And, oh yeah, by the way, no different back then as it now when the women don't like it when the guy's saying you shouldn't be hanging out with her. But you got to pay attention to who she hangs out with and listen to your gut and draw the boundaries. You may not be popular because of that, but you got to do it. All right, guys, that was it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. And, guys, you got a story to share or a question to ask me, send it my way, strongsuccessfulmale@gmail.com. And if it's a good one, I'll definitely cover it. And be sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.